Unacademy. Let's crack it.
नमस्कार दोस्तों, अभी तक हम जो वर्ल्ड अफेयर्स पर आपके लिए कंटेंट लेकर आ रहे थे उससे बिल्कुल अलग कंटेंट आज हम आपके लिए लेकर आ रहे हैं. वी आर गोइंग टू ब्रिंग अ वेरी गुड जियोपॉलिटिकल पॉडकास्ट विद आवर बेस्ट जियोपॉलिटिकल एक्सपर्ट ऑफ इंडिया. आई थिंक Abhijit Chavda sir, welcome to the World Affairs team sir.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Sir, so I think अभी के लिए बहुत अच्छा ये होगा that we would talk on the topic of the Middle East or to be very precise West Asia. So there is lot going on in West Asia as you know. So from there we'll start with the attack of Hamas on Israel.
Yes.
Israel is known for its defense equipments. Israel is known for its dependence on machinery. So इतना बड़ा अटैक हुआ and 1400 Israeli citizens got killed in that attack. So what do you make out of that attack? What was it an intelligence failure? और था क्या ये जो पूरा इतना अटैक जो हुआ हमास का कैसे सक्सेसफुल हो गया? हमास इज अ टेररिस्ट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन. सो आई थिंक इसराइल से डायरेक्ट इम्पैक्ट करना और इजरायली सिटीजन्स को इतनी बड़ी मात्रा में जो उन्होंने अटैक किया वो सक्सेसफुल होना, तो क्या वो इंटेलिजेंस फेलियर था? दे हैड नो क्लू अबाउट दैट. सो व्हाट?
या गुड क्वेश्चन. जब किसी एस्टैब्लिश्ड नेशन के ऊपर सक्सेसफुल अटैक कहीं से भी होता है, इट इज ऑलवेज एन इंटेलिजेंस फेलियर. वो होना ही है, बिकॉज you are supposed to, they are supposed to know what's happening. They are supposed to be able to avert and prevent such attacks. और इतना बड़ा अटैक होना, that is, and that too on almost the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War, which was the previous biggest intelligence failure. So yeah, it doesn't look good for Israel. They have the best surveillance equipment, they have human intelligence, they have signals intelligence, they have all kinds of stuff, and still they could not see this coming. Hamas ने इतने सारे tunnels बना रखे हैं. I don't know how many hundreds of kilometers of tunnels in Gaza itself, and they have stockpiled so many, इतने सारे rockets उन्होंने stockpile किए हैं. और ये सब कितना अच्छे से प्लान करके इन्होंने एग्जीक्यूट किया. वो सारे बैरियर्स वो काट दिए उन्होंने, जो वायर्स थे एंड ऑल दैट. और फिर उससे भी वो सिग्नल ट्रिप नहीं हुआ कि भाई यहाँ पे कुछ हो रहा है. फिर उन्होंने हैंग ग्लाइडर्स, पैराग्लाइडर्स से टेररिस्ट भेजे. इतना सारा मल्टी लेयर्ड ऑपरेशन उन्होंने किया, एंड इजराइल वाज कॉट नैपिंग क्लियरली. सो इट इज डेफिनेटली अ जाइगैंटिक इंटेलिजेंस फेलियर. No two questions about it. Definitely a big intelligence failure. And then the response was massive. But they lost 1400 or more lives, and that is obviously a big blot on the intelligence apparatus that Israel boasts of. They have Mossad, they have Shin Bet, they have so much more, and they have the reputation of being the best in the world. So that obviously is kind of now, there's a question mark on that.
हाँ एग्जैक्टली सर. एक्चुअली व्हाट वाज देयर कि पहले एक मिडिल ईस्ट के अंदर में आई थिंक योम किपर वॉर के बाद दिस इज द सेकंड बिगेस्ट फेलियर ऑफ इजराइल.
यस.
सो दे हैड दिस नोशन कि इजराइल का एक डिटरेंस है मिडिल ईस्ट. आई थिंक दे गॉट पफ्ड अप विद दैट डिटरेंस कि नोबडी इज गोइंग टू डू दैट थिंग. द थिंग एग्जैक्टली इज कि व्हाट हमास एग्जैक्टली वांट्स फ्रॉम इजराइल, बिकॉज इन स्टार्टिंग वी सी कि दे वर टॉकिंग ऑफ pact and they were talking of peace talks. They were pursuing, and the role of Qatar and Egypt comes in, and they were trying to make a peace with Israel. Then अचानक से ऐसा क्या हुआ, and that too on the very close to the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur.
1 day later.
हाँ. So how they were planning this thing from a long time.
Must be for a long time.
So how Israel didn't come to know, US didn't know with such good intelligence services. So don't you think there is a lot more than what we see in Middle East?
Than what we see on the surface.
Yeah, we see on the surface.
So as we know, Hamas is most likely, you can say, a proxy of Iran, right? Hamas, Hezbollah are proxies of Iran. Iran has other proxies like various elements in Iraq. Iraq is a significant stronghold, you can say, to a large extent of Iran. They also have the Houthis, which are the Ansar Allah faction in Yemen, and so on. So Iran is a very geopolitically active and ambitious nation, and they seek to project power far beyond their shores. और ईरान जब से 1979 में जब वो रेवोल्यूशन हुआ, इस्लामिक रेवोल्यूशन, ईरान एक थियोक्रेटिक रिपब्लिक बन गया, इस्लामिक रिपब्लिक बन गया. तब से उनका जो सरकार है, गवर्नमेंट है, उनका ये मानना है कि इजराइल डज नॉट हैव द राइट टू एग्जिस्ट. So they are working towards that, and they obviously see Iran is a civilization historically, the one of the 3 oldest civilizations in Asia existing. Of course, it is no longer that civilization; it is now an Islamic republic. But they still have that memory, and they want to once again regain some of the glory, and that's why they're also pursuing a nuclear program. So overall, Iran wants to become the dominant actor in the West Asia region. And one of the major impediment, the major obstacle in their way is obviously Israel, and Israel has a gigantic ally in the US. And it's very interesting that the Americans, whenever they have allies, they have military bases there. Israel is the only nation where they don't have military bases.
Military bases, yeah.
So yeah, that's interesting. So ये बात है. So why did Hamas attack Israel? Well, Hamas seeks to also eliminate and exterminate Israel. See, Israel tried to implement a two-state solution by giving Gaza to Hamas. आप Gaza ले लो, आप उसको rule करो. I mean, they had given
that.
autonomy to Gaza, and the people of Gaza elected Hamas. And now Hamas has been in power ever since, and they seek to destroy Israel. So it is that's the kind of situation it is. They want Palestine free from the river to the sea, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, which means no Israel. So for Israel, it's an existential threat, and for Hamas, well, it is kind of an ally of Iran and so on. So बहुत सारे अलग-अलग factors हैं इसमें. Egypt, like you said, is involved. In Egypt में भी बहुत सारे problems हैं. For example, the Muslim Brotherhood is a problem from the government's perspective. Morsi was elected, but then he was overthrown.
So like sir, जैसे Egypt का when we see starting, Egypt was the leader of the Muslim world, as we can say. When we see starting में history के part में, Egypt
from
was the leader. हाँ.
Nasser के ज़माने में.
उसके Nasser के ज़माने में.
Yes.
Then interestingly, what we see after Nasser, that Egypt came on the side of US and Israel and started to peace talk. So why was this? And then suddenly Iran comes in 79 and the whole he tries to become the leader of the Muslim world. So how this geopolitical shift happened in?
See, it's a great question. See, earlier during the Nasser's time, he was very much pro-USSR. And Israel was the big enemy, and there were wars between the two nations. And so, I mean, there was a short-lived Islamic United Arab Republic in which Syria was involved, Jordan was involved, and Egypt as well. That was a short-lived experiment, did not work. But the USSR was trying to project power in the region. And they were supplying weapons and bombers and fighter planes and whatnot to Egypt. The problem with the USSR is that they do not have the ability to project power too far away from the shores for too long. And the decline of the USSR starts around this time. कि उनका power projection ability धीरे-धीरे कम होने लगा. So then it was smart of Iran, or smart of Egypt, to make the sensible thing and become an ally of the US. Otherwise, the US would destroy them in some way or the other. So then they shifted. They became an ally of the US. They are now essentially, you can say, very much on the US side. And that's why after the Sinai War and all that, the Sinai Peninsula was returned by Israel to Egypt because the Americans, one can say, behind the scenes must have brokered this and everything went to normal. So there are all these factors in that. But right now, it's all advantage US in this region.
So actually, what Israel did was that it attacked the Iranian embassy in Syria.
Yes. So March 1.
So first question is why Syria is base for so many of the militias, and why it has now become a buffer state for Iran, we can say. Secondly, what this Israel did was to directly bring Iran into this complete thing, because previously what Iran was doing, कि पीछे से it was funding the militias, funding Hamas, funding Hezbollah, but not coming on the forefront, because I don't know various reasons for economic problems in Iran and all that. But why Israel was trying to drag Iran into this directly? क्योंकि ये वॉर तो पूरा फिर बढ़ जाएगा एंड इसराइल का जो पर्पस है वो भी आई थिंक वो फेल हो जाएगा एंड इट विल नॉट गेट सपोर्ट फ्रॉम वेस्टर्न कंट्रीज ऑल्सो. सो व्हाई इनिशियली Israel did this to bring Iran into this?
Yeah, so Syria is the place where this happened. So not March 1, April 1 this year, 2024. And Syria is a place of contention. If you look at the far east of Syria, there are a couple of US military bases there. So the Syrian government is not in control of the entire nation. And the Americans in the 2010s, in the early 2010s, tried to do a regime change in Syria and get rid of Mr. al-Assad. And if it was not for Mr. Putin, Mr. al-Assad would have gone long ago. So Mr. Putin was able to project power all the way to Syria. Utna unka power projection ability hai. And that's why the Assad regime, the Assad government is still in power. So there is that happening there. And when Russia is involved, China is also involved and Iran is also involved. So there is a kind of trilateral axis of some kind. Russia, China, Iran are cooperating together, working together in the West Asia region. And the Russians have a base in Latakia in Syria and so on and so forth. I'll not go into the details. So there is significant, you can say, Iranian and Russian presence in Syria. So now Israel is really, really worried about Iran. Iran has not been at war for decades. Iran has very good drones. They manufacture those Shahid 2 and whatnot drones. Very good drones. They have a very powerful missile technology. They have they have good drones. They have good missiles, ballistic missiles, good cruise missiles, and they also could be on the verge of going nuclear. After Mr. Donald Trump walked out of the JCPOA in 2017-18, whatever, 2018. Then Iran has gone back to purify, enriching uranium hexafluoride, all those centrifuges and all that. So they could be on the verge of having nuclear weapons. They probably have enough fissile material by now to build a few nuclear weapons. And that is an existential danger once again for Israel. That's a very, very genuine, real and present danger. So if you drag Iran into some kind of conflict, then they were able to spend, use up some of their arms and ammunition, and their stockpiles could go down. And overall, the Americans have also dreamt for a very long time of attacking and taking out the Iranian nation. Yeah, so all these factors are there. So they attack, the Israelis go ahead and launch an airstrike on the Iranian consulate in Damascus. I mean, I'm not taking sides here, but this is clearly from a neutral perspective a violation of international law. But they did this, and then Iran had to respond.
So again, that question will again come from the response which Iran did. Like many experts are calling it a symbolic attack because Iran had much powerful defense equipments. It can have an attack which have significant loss to Israel. But यहाँ पे Iran, we see that Iran didn't do that. It was kind of a symbolic attack, a message to the public that we have taken our revenge, and then that did nothing. If we see, so why was that? What was that stance?
See, when you take actions, geopolitical actions, foreign policy actions, your foreign policy is mediated by your domestic policy, by what your public wants. So you have to always make sure that the public is happy and placated, and they don't get upset about what the government is doing. Government is not strong enough, or government अच्छा काम नहीं कर रही है, government weak need है, ऐसा दिखना नहीं चाहिए. And also, Iran cannot afford to get dragged into a big war right now. They have built up so many things and all that. They will lose all that if there's a big war. If there's a full-scale war with Israel or with the US. The American बहुत सारे bases है West Asia region में, बहुत सारे military bases है. So Iran also doesn't want to get involved in a big war. But they had to do something about this. This is a blatant attack on Iranian sovereignty, essentially. So what they did is they first launched a whole bunch of drones. Drones are not supersonic. आ रहे दिख रहा है भाई, drones आ रहे हैं. उसके बाद जब drones पास आने लगे इजराइल के, तब उन्होंने cruise missiles और ballistic missiles launch किए at different times, and this was all timed to reach Israel at the same time. But they gave the signal to Israel कि भाई drones आ रहे हैं, you can see on the radar. So Israel was prepared. And the Jordanian air defense came into action, the Saudi air defense came into action, and most of these drones and missiles were neutralized. Some of them hit the targets, a few. So overall, Iran ensured that they launch a massive strike, well, numerically massive. It doesn't do too much damage. So from their perspective, we have saved face, we have done this, we launched a massive number of missiles, and they claim it was successful. Israel claims it was not successful, but we are claiming it was successful. So that way the public is happy and their prestige is restored, and they were able to launch a massive strike with only a fraction of their stockpile. So that also demonstrates कि हमारी capability क्या है. And they were also able to gauge what kind of response you will get from the defensive forces.
Different Arab nations.
Yeah, from the different Arab nations. So they were able to gauge that also by doing this. So it also served their purpose to a large extent.
This was, you can say, kind of a testing what they were doing. What will happen if this comes into a full-fledged war?
So it was a symbolic strike. It was not something that will escalate tensions too much. And it also allowed them to test out the responses of the other nations.
And then very interestingly, sir, we see that how Israel was pursuing this war. Very aggressively it was pursuing. They were killing Hamas troops, or more precisely the terrorists. They were killing them, going in their way. But when we see that Iran comes in directly, then Israel also, what Israel did was कि उन्होंने अपने full-fledged तरीके से they didn't retaliate it. So why was that? Was there no US support then?
I think the US, there are elements within the US State Department who would very much want to have a full-scale war with Iran. Okay, but there will be other more sensible elements also in the State Department. I think the older version of the State Department was very hawkish anti-Iran. Today it's like perhaps more balanced. I may be perhaps wrong because I don't know what they're thinking, but
I think this shift took place after Donald Trump, because he was not very interested in pursuing wars in Afghanistan or in Syria, and so he was of a view कि बुला लेते हैं troops को वापस, and why we are doing this.
Yeah. So what happens then is that after Iran launches these strikes, Israel also has to do something. So they launch an airstrike from outside of Iranian airspace, and they hit a few targets, including some radar base or something near the Natanz nuclear facility. It maybe destroys a few radars and things, but overall the damage is minimal. So Israel ने भी कह सकता है कि हमने भी retaliate कर दिया है, and now Iran is claiming कि कुछ damage नहीं हुआ है. So it means Iran is done now. We are not responding anymore. So overall they have diffused the situation from their own perspectives in different ways, but I think the possibility of war is low now. And the other problem is that the distance between the two nations is 1,000 kilometers. Just the borders.
Many countries are coming between them. So
how do you fight?
How do you fight?
Long distance करेंगे क्या fight?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sir, and so इसमें जो peace talks को broker कर रहे हैं, there are two countries, Qatar and Egypt are brokering the peace talks. So what is for them in this whole scenario? What profit they are getting from it, and what they are trying to make an image of a broker, a very superpower broker of Middle East?
Yeah, so I don't see these two nations as entirely independent or sovereign nations. They are both essentially, to a large extent, controlled by the US. There are, I think, only 4 genuinely sovereign nations in the world: the US, Russia, China, and India. Apart from that, none of the other nations are fully sovereign. You're either part of NATO, which means your sovereignty is pooled, and your army is under a different command, or you're part of the European Union, in which once again you have pooled sovereignty. So none of these nations, and other nations in Africa, they hardly have any sovereignty. So sovereignty is a very precious thing. Only 4 nations are genuinely sovereign. When it comes to Qatar, Egypt, they are essentially, you can say, tools in the instruments in the hands of the US. So that is how I see it. Obviously, it's not as straightforward, black and white as that. There are domestic compulsions also. There's the religious angle as well. And there are so many other factors. But overall, these are tools of American policy.
Also, sir, Hamas has its headquarters in Qatar.
Yes.
So that is very interesting. If US has so much influence over Qatar, so how can Hamas survive in Qatar eventually?
Well, they were fighting ISIS also. And ISIS, if you read certain books about how ISIS actually came into being, so you will see lots of US fingerprints over there.
Yeah. So there's a theory that ISIS was created by US for Afghanistan thing to counter
Syria also.
Syria and Afghanistan. So they had to counter all these.
And ISIS was apparently the bad guy, and Al Qaeda was apparently the good guy. So Al Qaeda is also on the US side. So that's the kind of game that is played at various levels.
So you can say that means US has been talking to Hamas and significantly has been supporting Israel also.
Yeah, so they will fight against us sometimes, but in the future we can also use them for our own benefit without them even knowing about it, or them maybe knowing about it. When it comes to Taliban fought the US for 20 years. Today they are getting a weekly $60 million cash stipend from the US. Weekly. So that's the game that's been played.
Means US has taken the knots in his hands, and they don't want to let it go.
They want control over everything.
Yeah, but many people, sir, many geopolitical experts are claiming that now US is losing its relevance in Middle East and losing its relevance in Asia itself.
Okay.
So what's that? But when we see from the surface that US has so many countries are in US hands completely, like all the NATO countries, you can say. Middle East, mein Qatar, you can say, Egypt, you can say, Saudi Arabia, more or less. Now it has changed sides to Russia. In Asia also, we can say. So how US has lost its relevance? Does it actually has lost its relevance, or they're showing the world that, okay, we are good guys and we are not doing anything now?
So lots of people claim that the US influence in the world is declining. US power globally is in retreat and all that. Now, if you look at the ground realities, take a map of the world and plot with pins, red pins, let's say, all the US military bases outside of US territory. There are more than 800. 800 bases. Okay? And that's all over the world. They can project power anywhere. They can intervene militarily anywhere on demand at 60 minutes notice. That's the kind of power the US has. Except in the deep South Pacific region where there's nothing at all. Even there they can intervene if they want to with missiles and all that. So there's only one superpower, the US. What's declining is US prestige. Because of the domestic, divisiveness that's spread across the US, all this race war and whatnot that is happening, and obviously the kind of education decline they're having. The education system is declining. The era of US exceptionalism is long gone. So they are becoming, as a society, a more mediocre society, not an exceptional society. But as a hard power, they are still the number one power. So their prestige is declining, the quality of the society is declining, but as a power, as a geopolitical power, they're still not even close. No one is even close to them. Yeah.
And then again, sir, if we look at, to conclude this whole conversation, if you look at Middle East, it has always been disturbed. But Middle East is known for its money, its oil, its gas.
Yes.
So what do you see in future of Middle East? What will come out of Middle East if there is so much of regional tension in Middle East? That Lebanon is in tension, you see Jordan, then we see Israel, then we see Iran, and then Hezbollah, Hamas, all these in Syria, Qatar. So almost all the countries, Yemen also, all the countries are disturbed. So what you make out of Middle East in future after 10 years or 20 years, what will come of Middle East? And what impact will it have on the world trade? And I think whole geopolitical shift will be there if
so, if you look at the map of the Middle East, Iran, Persia is a historical civilization. It's a civilization state more than a nation state. When it comes to the other nations of the Middle East, if you look at the lines on the map, these are straight lines. किसी ने मैप के ऊपर एक रूलर डाल के ऐसे 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 कर दिया. It was all done during the First and Second World War by the Western powers. When you draw straight lines on the map, it divides communities and puts people together in one country who don't really historically belong together. Then you have civil wars and problems. You see that all across Africa. You see that in the Middle East also. So these problems will continue because the nations have been created in this manner. Iraq, it used to be Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia is the region between the Tigris and the Euphrates. Historically, that was it. So they have created artificial nations, mandate of Jordan, mandate of Palestine, mandate of Syria, the British mandate, the French mandate. वहाँ से ये सब निकल के आया है, and these problems are going to continue. And the Middle East is always in crisis because the crisis is always driven from outside. It's the West that has always kept it in crisis so as to exploit the divisions and the strife and to maximize their profits and benefit. Suez was very important for the longest time, and that's why Egypt had to be under their control and so on. So there is no short-term or medium-term solution to the Middle East problem. The only solution is when the West actually, leaves the place and stops interfering in the matter. Then there will be some period of strife, and then things will emerge. Maybe a more orderly situation may emerge, but that's a long-term scenario I'm talking about. In the present day, I don't see any solution right now. And when it comes to the global economy, that's bad for the global economy. It's bad for India because, see, right now much of our oil comes from Russia. And we have other sources. We would very much like to get oil from our neighbors, Persia, Iran. But the Americans, they're too powerful and they say no, and we have to accede to their demands. We have this great source right next door. But much of the other parts of the world still get oil from the region, Saudi Arabia, Persia. And if there is a war in the region, if the Strait of Hormuz is closed, or if there is piracy and terrorism in the open seas, then all that supply of oil and petro energy will be severely impacted, and that will cause oil prices to shoot up and the whole economy will be in turmoil. Not a good scenario for the world and not a good scenario for India. I hope it doesn't happen, but it's always a possibility.
Okay, sir. And then when we'll see India, like China has entered into Middle East now with this middle corridor and all that projects and all that investments it had been doing. And when we see India has also come up with the IMEC corridor project and what. So is India trying to be a mediator in the Middle East, being in good relations with Iran, also keeping good relations with Saudi Arabia, the other power bloc, and the Israel power bloc? So what India is actually trying to do through IMEC, not only economically, but also geopolitically?
So India, this current Indian government is very realistic. It's very pragmatic. It's very practical. It knows that India is a middle power. India is not a great power like China. India is not a near superpower like Russia. It is not a superpower like the US. India is a middle power. It's an emerging middle power. In 20 years, it may be close to being a great power like China. So right now, we are a medium-sized fish in the big fish tank. And there are sharks and all that. So we play a kind of role in which we are everybody's friend. We don't take sides. We help mediate problems. We will patrol the Indian Ocean region, the Western Indian Ocean region, and do freedom of navigation operations and take care of the pirates over there and all. So we do that. And we will also try and construct corridors for trade and all that, which will benefit us and also Europe and also the Middle East. All the Middle Eastern nations are extremely favorably disposed towards India. We have excellent relations with the UAE, with Saudi Arabia, unimaginable 10 years ago, but it's there. So IMEC is a great initiative, but the Hamas-Israel war has kind of been a roadblock. So that's why nothing has happened. The Saudis wanted IMEC, the construction, to start within 45 days of the G20 summit.
Also UAE also started to talk that.
And UAE is very happy that India is rising as a power in the neighborhood because it is a benign power. It is not a hegemonic, scary power. We're not going to turn up next weekend and be at their doorstep with our warships. They know that. So overall, they feel good about India's rise. And if the Hamas situation gets better, then we can go ahead with the IMEC and we can connect our trade all the way with Greece, bypass Turkey. They're not happy about that, but so be it.
So we'll able to counter China if we come at a significant place in Middle East. That what you are saying.
Yes.
So I think that's all for today's. I think we should conclude this conversation now. So thank you for viewers, and also do let us in the comment box how was this conversation. How can we bring to you more of this conversation like that? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Unacademy. Let's crack it.